Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be discussing when to pick Cloak and Dagger, or the best times to pick Cloak and Dagger. Now, I know what you're thinking, what's going on here? Why are we starting sort of like halfway between this game, and why are we not playing Cloak and Dagger? Well, the first part of that is, A, we got railed, but the real reason is, B, we are actually not picking Cloak and Dagger, right? We're playing Sue this game. And so I wanted to go to the relevant part, which will be the next part of the game, where we're actually playing Cloak and Dagger. And so I think this game actually demonstrates perfectly when to pick Cloak and Dagger, when I think are all the best times to pick Cloak and Dagger. And so I kind of want to discuss that through this game, through the gameplay. So let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, everybody, welcome back. And as you guys can see here, we just swapped to Cloak and Dagger. This is the beginning of the next round. And so there's a few things with Cloak and Dagger. The first is that I think she actually has one of the best support ults in the game. And I don't think people realize it. In fact, she might even have the best support ult in the game. And the thing about Cloak and Dagger is that she has a lot of problems with her ult, which is what I'm going to discuss. And so hopefully it'll like kind of shed some light on the best times to pick her. But the thing about her is that she's too static in her ult, right? So like obviously when you ult, you have a lot of counters. Okay, so you have like the Magneto counter, of course, that everybody knows about. You have the Iron Man counters. Pretty much anybody that can one-shot you while you're ulting is going to be considered a counter, even Hawkeye. And so that's really one of the big reasons why I don't feel like she really gets picked up that much, especially because Magneto's like an S-tier character right now, and he's played in pretty much every single game. So one thing I do this game is that in the last round, we kind of got railed. And I was playing Invis, and Invis is like one of my favorite characters, so I didn't really want to swap off her. But I realized, I was like, listen, we have a lot more potential with Cloak and Dagger here because the big thing is they're not running any of those counters I just explained, right? They weren't running a Hawkeye, as you guys can see in the top right. They're not even running a Magneto. They're not running anybody that can potentially one-shot me. They are running Punisher Rocket, which can be a little troublesome, and even the Groot. But I feel like as long as like I'm playing around the Punisher Rocket ults, then we're completely fine. It's much easier to play around those than say like a Magneto ult. In fact, you could even say you want to run a Cloak and Dagger if you have a Magneto on your team to, just bubble you while you're ulting. Listen, I know that doesn't always work out. Maybe it works out for you guys, I'm not sure. But that doesn't really work out for me that much. It's like really a 50-50 on whether the Magneto ends up bubbling me or if everything like goes well. And even then, it's like, do I really want to risk that 50-50 on a support ult? Something that's like as beneficial as a support ult, right? Like if you lose that ult, you just lost a whole like 90 seconds of farm time to get that ult, right? And so it's just not something that I typically ever want to deal with when I'm playing her. So the first thing is one of the best times to pick her is picking her on Convergence. I explained this earlier, but this ult is leading me into it. Cloak and Dagger ult, first of all, that was an insane blind. I just had to, gas myself up there. But the thing about Cloak and Dagger ult is that it's each line is static, but it allows you to get in there. And so one of the reasons why I don't want to play Sue on at the very least this first point is because Sue ult, it's a lot more risky because you want to ult, of course, on point. But by ulting on point, your team has to get to that ult in the first place. And there's more ways to screw it up. There's more things that can happen that are just like negative for your team. Whereas with Cloak and Dagger ult, you're literally creating an infinite healing path, or almost an infinite healing path practically, that your allies can step on to walk to point. And that's what you saw just there. So because I looked at their team comp and I said, listen, these guys aren't running a Magneto. They're not running a one-shot ult. They're not running a Hawkeye. I can get away with playing Cloak and Dagger here. And it's perfect because we're on Convergence. And what just happened is exactly what I expected to happen. I was able to ult my team right into the point, and then Loki was able to copy me. By the way, shout out to Bomber for playing a nasty Loki this game, Monster B. I was duo queued with him, or I was actually like trio or quadra queued this game. And the Cloak Loki ults were working perfectly because after I Cloak ulted, he would just Cloak ult or vice versa, and there's just no way to deal with it. The other thing too is a lot of people don't realize that Cloak ult actually has as much healing as Luna ult. So Cloak ult is 250 HP per second. Luna ult's also 250 HP per second as of Season 2, as of like this update. And so that's one thing a lot of people don't realize. So like you're creating this path that's literally the same healing as Luna ult, but see, like there's no way for them to stop us here, right? They rocket ult, we're just going to kill this rocket ult. That's what you should be doing. That's exactly what we do. And then we just look for a crazy blind. But like there's no way for them to stop us from Cloak ulting in because they don't have any of those one-shot characters. So that's what makes this pick so freaking powerful, and really the only way to shut down our ult from flooding in like this is by picking those one-shot characters. So if they don't have them, then Cloak and Dagger has the potential to be a really good pick. Another really good time to pick Cloak and Dagger is when the enemy is running a heavy tank comp. Say like 3 tanks or tanks that are in your face all the time, because Cloak's E blinds them and makes them take more damage. And of course, both of these debuffs are super effective into tanks and dive in general. This game too, in particular, I was like, listen, as long as we have our ults up, they can't really stop us. So one of the comms I made this game was like, hey, listen, play for your ult, right? Or just play for the healer ults. Like, we are kind of just playing the game to just play for our healer ults. Now, obviously, you're trying to do that every single game, most likely, right? But especially with this one, because the other thing too is that they have Invis Woman and Rocket, and those are not going to stack up against 2 Cloak and Dagger ults, let alone 1, to be honest with you. It's not really going to work out that well for them. So that was another big thing as well. It's like, if we have a Cloak and Dagger and we're allowed to play C&D because they don't have any way of stopping it, and they're also not playing C&D, then their fight is honestly screwed. Because the other thing too is that C&D ult is the longest lasting support ult. When you consider like the entire duration of the ult, I think it's around like 20 seconds or so. It might be a little less, maybe a little bit more, but I'm gonna say around 20 seconds. And so you pretty much have this ult that heals like a Luna ult does, that is there for a little bit longer than Luna ult's going to be there. And so it's really, really hard to deal with that. Great green, by the way, from my Loki, and then I was able to get that ult off because of it. And like, there's no way they can possibly fight into this at all. There's just no way they can fight into this. So we're able to get this point really off the back of the C&D pick. And I actually think that my pick this game, like me switching over to C&D, is really what allows us to contest this game at all. Because I know you guys didn't see the first round, but like that first round was terrible. That first round was awful. So I really do think the major thing we switched up was picking the C&D, and it did allow us to essentially switch up a lot of what we were able to do, allow us to push forward, and that's exactly what we wanted. So I think she is best picked when, again, there's no one-shot characters, nothing that can get her out of her ult while she's ulting, and then on like convergence style points, especially. I mean, you could play her on Convoy in general. Like, it doesn't have to be convergence, but I really like her on convergence over other characters, over other supports, because of that way to get in. Luna can do the same thing as well. Don't forget about Luna. But I just think Cloak and Dagger, in my opinion, just does it a little bit better because of how long her ult lasts. And you can also do stuff while you're ulting, and I think that's the big thing. Whereas with Luna, like, while you're ulting, you're kind of just sitting there dancing. I guess you're not sitting there, you're just dancing. But with C&D, you can actually like influence the battle more than just the ult itself, which is super nice. So I think that's really good. One of the other big reasons to pick Cloak and Dagger is when the enemy has a lot of dive. Now, thankfully, this game, they didn't really go a dive-oriented comp, so I didn't really have to worry about that. But if they did, then she would actually still be a really good pick. Now, I'm not saying she's going to be better at dealing with dive than, say, some of the other supports like Loki, but she does have her place in the anti-dive. Because of Dagger's ability to bubble herself for self-sustain, and Cloak's ability to right-click to become invulnerable and hidden from sight, and reposition. Cloak also has the ability to blind the dive and do a ton of overall damage to the enemy, even killing them. This is going to make her kit very good against dive. And if you have a combination of her and Loki, like we do this game, and it makes it really hard to dive you guys because you have Dagger's bubble and you have Loki's green, which is going to make you very hard to kill. But I think the thing that really holds Cloak and Dagger back is going to be the fact that she's just static in her ult. And this staticness, of course, leads her to be countered pretty easily by the characters I mentioned earlier. She's also going to be pretty bad at pocketing a single character as opposed to some of the other supports, because a lot of her healing is mostly in the form of AoE, and because she has a lot of AoE, they didn't really give her as much single target healing. Not that her single target healing is bad by any means, it's just not going to be as good as some of the other supports. Like, for example, on this map and other maps like this, she's actually a really good pick because of that AoE healing. Your team is forced into that bottleneck area to get to this point, and so she has an insane heal efficiency because she's able to heal all of those players at once. Also, when enemies are moving through that bottleneck, that narrow area, you can hit an insanely big E on them, causing them to be blinded and take more damage as they're moving to the point, which is massive enough to heavily influence the fight. But unfortunately, we're going to end up losing that point. I just think that we just got overwhelmed or overrun right there, and one of our guys got picked first, and usually when that happens and we don't have our support ults up, then like there's not much we can do about it. We just get overran. So we're going to go ahead and walk back here. We do have our ult. That's the really important part. And so obviously we want to play for this. They only have about 30 seconds. That's the thing about overtime, is that even if they get the point right, they're not actually getting more time, which is nice. And so like their time is consistently dwindling. So here I just want to ult in, waste some time. And again, I know they can't kill me. And because my ult lasts so long, it's going to last way longer than, say, Invis Woman ult. And if Rocket tries to counter ult that, then it's going to go poorly for them too, because Rocket Ult's just going to get destroyed. So off my ult right there, we're actually able to get an insanely good ult. They didn't really have ults, and so we're going to be able to win this point. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, so I've gone over what I think are the best times to pick Cloak and Dagger, while also talking about a lot of her flaws, which are probably the best times to not pick her. But I think if all of these conditions are met, like there's no one-shot characters, there's narrow spaces to efficiently heal, also when they have a lot of tanks because of how good Cloak's E is into them, I actually think she's one of the best supports in the game. She just requires a bit more conditions to be met than other supports do. So funny enough, one thing we actually end up doing at this point is that we actually calm to not do damage to them. Now, I think we were still doing a little bit of damage, but we actually wanted to stop doing damage. And this is a strat I kind of thought of a long time ago. I didn't make this call, but I was thinking about this a long time ago. Where on this point in particular, like, if you just don't do damage to them and you farm up your healer ults, because they're of course going to do damage to you, like, you just win the point, right? Because then you have healer ults and they don't. And so, like, that was kind of the call here. That was the calm. Fortunately, Ferris ends up dying. Right when Loki ends up ulting into me, so it's like really, really bad timing. But I think like we still end up making this work here, unless this push gets slowed down altogether. But here I'm just trying to build up my ult. It's also important to note that like when you're inside another healer ult, the way to build up your ult faster is not by healing because everybody else is already getting healed, but it's by doing damage, especially as CND. So that's why I want to sit there and do damage. My healing is going to be very minuscule compared to the other healing, but I end up dying. I actually don't even know how I died, to be honest with you, because there was no like rocket ult or anything like that buffing him. So I was actually a little confused how I died that fast. But I mean, he got me. He got me. So it worked out. Until it didn't, because we're actually capturing the point and we somehow won that fight without my ult doing anything. I don't know how that worked, but I'm happy it did. And the enemy squirrel girl realized they lost, so she ends up dying too. That was actually a pretty good stagger because we're able to push this a little bit further now. Typically, I would say, like, especially in overtime, like, you want to contest this here because you know where the cart's going to end or you know where the convoy is going to end, and they don't have that much room to work with. So Squirrel Girl actually inting there was actually really, really troll now that I think about it. I always like to throw my E on people, not necessarily when they're weak, but because it increases the healing they take by like 15%, so Loki and I can do more healing to them. If they have my E on them. So especially like when they're inside a healer ult, because if I E them inside a healer ult, they're healing for more than 250 HP a second. They're probably healing for around like 300 HP a second or something like that, which is insane. And then we ended up winning the game. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this game and took away like best times to pick Cloak and Dagger. Again, this was like a really, really good demonstration of a good Cloak and Dagger game. If they had anything else, like a Magneto, anything that can one-shot me out of my ult, I would have swapped immediately and picked something else. But we were allowed to pick Cloak and Dagger that game and stay on it because they didn't adapt to the fact that we picked it. And I really do think me swapping to this pick is why we primarily won the game. If I stayed on Sue, I actually don't think we would have won this game, personally. So I hope you guys enjoyed the gameplay, and I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary. I hope you guys learned a lot, and until the next video, see ya.